Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Leading Equity Podcast, a podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest, I got two sisters here. Melinda and Candace are here with me. So without further ado, Melinda, Candace, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we're excited to be here.
I could tell. I can really tell. So thank you. So glad that you're here. It's a Sunday, so it's fair enough. But I'm excited to have this conversation. We're going to be talking about math education and the work that you're doing and how we can go beyond standardized testing. But before we get started, Melinda, I'd love for you to start with yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Sure. So I reside in Brooklyn, New York. My background is actually in biology. So I pivoted over to mathematics. I have my undergraduate in biology, and I'm also a certified medical scientist at Why Hate Math, which is our math tutoring center located in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, New York. At Why Hate Math, I work primarily in operations, and I also work with the primary education level of mathematics along with Candace.
All right. Well, Candace, I'm going to throw it at you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
I am co-owner of Why Hate Math in Brooklyn, and I also am a math consultant in several DOE schools in New York City. I was born here in Brooklyn, raised in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and I've been back in New York for about 8 years.
All right. Perfect. So you said your organization is called Why Hate Math. I'm curious, how did that name come about?
Candace, one of her students actually came up with the name. Prior to having the lab, she was actually going to students' home and tutoring in person. And she had one student who was having some difficulties learning mathematics. She was a high school student. And she kept telling Candace that she hated math and she had no interest in learning it whatsoever. And she screamed out, basically, "I hate math." And Candace looked at her and said, "You know what? I'm going to open up a center one day and I'm going to name it Why Hate Math." So Candace might be better at telling the story there, but that's pretty much it. So the inspiration of the name was actually from a student exclaiming her dislike for mathematics. So we were able to spin on that and really pose the question out to the public, essentially, of why do so many people exclaim or show their disdain for mathematics, such an important subject. So that's pretty much where the name came from.
I asked her, why do you hate this subject that we need for so many reasons. We need it for school, but we need it beyond school. We need it in our day-to-day lives. We need it to think. We need to be able to think logically. And people every day say, or a lot of students when am I going to use this outside of the classroom? And a lot of the time people say, because, with your finances or money. And I try to get them to really think beyond that and talk to them about different ways that math is used every single day.
All right. Okay. Well, that name stuck. And so when did this organization start, Candace?
Well, I was tutoring private in people's home, as Melinda said. And then in 2020, we launched an online site where we can start helping students virtually. And then towards the end of 2020, we still weren't in school. We opened up a room in our home in East New York, Brooklyn, and students would come in after school or on Saturday mornings to get tutoring. And that the word of mouth kept catching on. We had a lot of customers coming in our house. And then Melinda told me, we have to get out of the house. We need more space.
Yeah, the location of where she referenced, East New York. So that's one of the lower socioeconomic neighborhoods in Brooklyn for the people who are unfamiliar with that community. So it was the fact that people were so receptive, it showed that although these people might have had a lower income and lived below poverty line, that they still wanted a supplemental for their children. So for us, that kind of triggered something and said, we were we really have to kind of push forward and provide even more for them, provide more resources and tools for them. So we really started digging deeper and began to establish what it would look like and what the environment would look like to create an actual center outside of our home.
I was going to say we did that for 3 years. Then we opened up in Bed-Stuy in September 2023, the Why Hate Math Lab.
Okay. All right. Well, congratulations on the work that you're doing. Sounds like you're doing some amazing work. It's interesting how 2020 was a year where a lot of things started, especially on the virtual side. And so I'm glad to hear that you have a center, you have a place where students can come in and do work and learn about math, which leads me to my next question. And I'm going to throw this to you, Candace, because I'm a school principal. And I mean, right now we're getting ready for ACT. ACT is going to be coming up in a few months, and math tends to be one of the harder subjects that some of our students are working through, especially in preparation of the test. And so a lot of times we focus on the standardized testing. We focus on making sure that students can do well on those tests. However, I know that there's more to the story, if you will, when it comes to testing and when it comes to math. So I just want to know from your end, why is it important to go beyond just standardized testing?
For me, standardized testing, it's something where you want to get a bunch of data to describe students or to understand how students' education is going, or their level of knowledge or their proficiency, or have they mastered these standards. But the test itself can't always do that for students. There are so many factors that go into what a student's proficiency level really is. And sometimes those tests they don't allow for that. Just because you don't answer a multiple choice question correct doesn't mean that you don't have some level of mastery on the topic. And we need to be able to look at students as a whole students and not just use these tests to determine what their level of proficiency is.
And I'll kind of like pivot from that area. So I know that you mentioned you all's test. So in New York, we also have state exams that the students start taking from grade 3. And then once they get to high school, then they begin their Regents exam. So once they go into 3rd grade and they start these standardized tests, the schools, as well as the parents, generally the parents have the option to opt their children out. So the children who have the IEPs, the individual education plans and so forth, they have the opportunity to opt out, which kind of skews the data essentially. And most times it's to the benefit for the school, but not for the individual, because now this group of children are kind of being left out of exactly what we're saying, that we may not really care about the standardization, but then we also are losing a certain type of data and understanding of how they are learning and what they're learning and how they should be learning. So overall, it's like the system is a little problematic overall, not just for general learners.
Yeah. And some people have test anxiety. Some people need to be, they do have some accommodations for IEPs, like testing in a different room or having your test read aloud. But I still don't think there's enough accommodation made for each student to take those tests. And some students are just really, honestly, truly are not good test takers. So now we're seeing things that way. New York has done I would say a decent job of making the tests be like they put names in there that students may recognize more, things of that nature. So they've tried over the years to make it more adaptable to each child. But I still think that there's so many missing points to make these tests more equitable for everyone.
What kind of points are missing then to make it equitable?
For example, now that some of the tests are online, actually 4th and 5th grades required online, and some students have not had access to using computers and be able to type in those answers in a certain way. Some students get test prep on these type of questions, or they're able to go to tutoring while other students are not.
Also, in terms of the equity, is also the educators that we have. So although everyone is taking the standardized exam, we're not having standardized learning.
Yeah.
We don't have the standardized tools, standardized resources. So especially right now, post-pandemic, a lot of educators have been leaving the field essentially. So now you have a lot of people who may not even be so proficient in math, teaching mathematics to children. So that's problematic. And now you want everyone to have a certain standard of they're not having a certain standard of learning, but you want them to produce results. So for me, that's really unfair.
Yeah. And the standard of learning too, being different curriculums in different schools based on what district that you live in. So how am I getting tested on someone in another part of the city, not even in my same borough, who's using a whole different math curriculum? And that some of these districts are just, they're trying out a new curriculum for the year. And it's almost like we don't even know if this is truly works. And sometimes it doesn't work. And then the company comes back and says, oh, we're going to make a part 2 version of this curriculum. So I was like, wait, so part 1 didn't work. But the other students were getting another curriculum that did work. And now we're testing that way. And it can bring a lot of challenges. I've personally seen challenges in different schools. I'm working as a math consultant in different areas of Brooklyn. I see a difference.
Okay. I like that. All right. So it sounds like there's definitely some things that we need to do in order to support students, again, beyond the standardized testing. One of the things, I think it was Candace that mentioned the idea of, when it comes to equity, the idea of not everyone has access to tutoring. So we can agree that a lot of students don't have access to, or some students may not have access to parents that are able to help them at home. My kids come home with their math and I'm looking at them. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I haven't done that in 20 years. So I get that. But then there's other families where the parents are able to do that, or they are able to provide or get tutoring sourced out, things like that. So here's the question that I have. Let's transition over to skills. So we talked about test anxiety. We talked about maybe students that are just trying to acquire some of those skills in order to complete their classes, things like that. Talk to us about the different type of skills that you are helping students with. For example, the test anxiety. What are some of the things that you're doing to support students that have those kind of needs?
When students come in, we at Why Hate Math, one of our biggest focuses is building confidence, building their math confidence. So once we start with an assessment, we get to know the student, we build relationships, and we make learning fun for them. They genuinely love to come there. They love doing math there. I just had a new student the other day, and her mom, it was her second session, and her mom said on the first session, she had to drag her in there. She said, I don't want to go to math tutoring. I don't want to go. And she said, now her daughter's like, are we going to math tutoring today? Because we make it fun. We make you feel confident, and we let you know that you can do this. And we work with you on strategies that you feel comfortable with. And we get to know your learning style, and we help you with your learning style. And the reason I say that that's important for the test anxiety is because once you bring up that confidence, then your anxiety begins to decrease when it comes to math. And also, we had one student, and we advocate for our students in terms of, we talk to their parents to tell them the different options that they have. We had one student who had an IEP, and he was struggling. He wasn't doing well on his exams. And then we told her, hey, you should talk to the administrative team at your school about him possibly getting a separate testing location. And once he did that, he got an 89 on the next test, and that made him feel really good about himself. But other ways to support test anxiety is take breaks. We use different strategies to help them understand how to break down a multiple choice questions. We use strategies. One strategy that I like is like the 3 reads math strategy. You read the question 3 times and you take out different information every time you read it, because now that breaks down the question for you, so you're not seeing this big question. Or we give them different scaffolds into breaking things into 2 steps, so that now the question doesn't seem as challenging or as long. So those are just things that we do to bring down the testing anxiety.
One of the things I'm familiar with, and I don't know if you've come across this work, Dr. Claude Steele talks about stereotype threats, and they did some research in regards to girls and a perception of math. There's a stereotype that girls can't perform as well as boys can when it comes to mathematics. Now, we know that that's just a stereotype and it's not true. However, that's something that a lot of girls have been told. And so when it came to the test, for the math test, they were already put at a place where they were thinking they weren't as confident as maybe the boys were. However, what they did in this study was they said, okay, before they started the test, they said, girls, just so you know, there's a stereotype, or you're expected not to perform as well as boys can perform. However, we know that's not true, and I know you're going to do a great job. Just kind of give them a little pep talk. Don't believe the hype kind of thing. Don't believe what you're being told. You are going to be successful. And the girls performed a lot better just off of those pep talks. Are there some strategies also that you use that might be similar, or is that some research that you might have come across?
Not necessarily the research aspect, but in our day-to-day. So as Candace mentioned, we do the assessment, kind of initially get them during that assessment period to dispel what they felt coming in the door. So during the assessment, we go through the standards, and the student may be completely wrong, like totally left field, and have no idea of what the next step should be. And we kind of like find the little points that they do correct and put so much emphasis on it. We use a lot of terminologies like you're a genius, you're intelligent, like, wow, this is amazing, you're doing such a great job. Like just the words of like affirmations and reassuring them that, hey, you're on the right track. Like, hey, let's take a look and see how we can build this step up better. Or let's come back and maybe let's look at some addition strategies that we could work on. So once they are not kind of being knocked down and they're like, okay, no one's yelling at me for not understanding this, or I don't feel like I shouldn't ask a question or pose a question. Like now we're building up that confidence for them, that those strategies really help them, because they leave and it's like their parents will ask us right in front of them, like, well, how are they doing? We're like, amazing. Like this kid may really not be proficient, and that's okay, because we know that we're going to focus on the areas that they need help with. But we're in front of them, we're like, absolutely genius, this child is. And they're hearing that and they leave out of there feeling like, I am a genius.
I'm gonna throw this one to you, Candace, because one of the things that Melinda said that I thought kind of stood out, and I think it's important, it's not something that we always do as educators, is the words of affirmation piece of things. So I want to see if you can build upon what Melinda was saying, as far as just saying those simple phrases that will kind of build that confidence. What are your thoughts when it comes to the importance of affirmations for students that are learning math?
It's so important, and I do it every single day. Sometimes I'm in a high school, and even at that level, the students, they feel so much better when you come in and you tell them, like, you can do it. And as Melinda said, pulling out that one thing that they did correctly. We could do the longest algebra question in the world and then get to the end. And if they can just say, now what's 3 + 4 is 7, I'm like jumping up and down, because now that increases their ability to want to participate. Now they want to raise their hand and answer a question in the classroom. Now they feel like this is a safe space. And you should be able to create a safe space in your classroom for students who want to participate, or just create a space in your classroom just to have fun with the math and be exciting, and include your students in what you're doing. I was speaking to a gentleman the other day at a high school here, and he works with the students as a dean, and he's working to become a social worker. And I actually had him come in one of our meetings with the Algebra 1 teacher, and to talk about how you can incorporate these students in what they like into your curriculum. So we actually sat there and we created do nows that were like similar to things that they liked, just so that they could see themselves in these math problems and get excited. And yeah, so positive praise is just the biggest deal to me. It's just all about what can we do to build up our students' confidence and to make them feel heard in the classroom.
I love this. I love these answers. And it's got me thinking, because I can think of, there's got to be at least a teacher out there that's a math teacher, for example, and they're like, man, I have students, or I have a student, that one student that I'm trying to reach. I'm teaching Algebra 1, and for some reason, I cannot seem to connect with them. And I want to throw this to you again, Candace, as far as what tips, what strategies can you provide for those students that, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, you had some students that, or a student that came grudgingly, did not want to be in that space, but turned things around. What kind of advice could you give to any type of teachers out there that are just trying to reach a student that just math is just really struggling with?
Well, number one, you have to build a relationship with that student, and they need to feel like it's a genuine relationship. They need to know that you're there for them and that you're there to help them. And I know it may sound easy, but it can be a challenge sometimes, especially when teachers have so many things going on and they have all these deadlines to meet. But if you could take just a small amount of time to say, hey, do you have siblings at home? What's your favorite thing to do? The relationship building is really key to all of this work. And getting to know your student, and then they will eventually open up to you, and then start with even the smallest of the math problem. Like I said, one of my biggest things is like, if it's algebra, if it's geometry, and it's something challenging, at least ask. I will point to that one student in the classroom, and I would ask them the easiest part of the question. And that's what I do all the time. And then they're like, wait, oh, I can. And then just them having that voice. And then after a while, maybe you ask them something a little bit more challenging, and then keep growing and working with them. And also, even if their answer is incorrect, like Melinda said earlier, a big thing that I like to do is point out what they did right. I like the way you were thinking, and going from there. That can bring math out of anybody. Trust me, I've dealt with so many different students, probably 1,000 students, and I've seen a lot of different areas of proficiency. And I know what you have to do is, and you don't even have to, honestly, you can come in one day and they're able to open up to you when they know that you're really there for them.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I tell you what, the two of you I've learned a lot just having this conversation about ways that we can go beyond just standardized testing. I heard relationship building is key, supporting students and letting them know, look, words of affirmation is very important. I mean, you brought out a lot of interesting things within today's conversation. Melinda, I'm going to start with you. I'd love for you to share with one final word of advice that you would like to provide to our listeners out there.
We have to understand that math is truly the universal language of the world, essentially, and that the fear of math is somewhat generational, essentially, or anything. Is everything that we do, it's coming from a previous generation, prior generation. Parents and the village that surround the student need to almost help to break those generational curses in regards to the fear of mathematics. Even if a parent doesn't understand, I think that they should even instill certain, just start instilling a positive outlook towards math and just education as a whole. And I think that will make a huge difference in the way that the students are approaching math and education.
All right. Well, what about you, Ken?
My final piece of advice is finding strategies to increase confidence in your classroom so that students can have a voice in math and that they can have a math identity and a STEM identity, because it's very important for them, and let them understand that they need it and that they can do it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Melinda, if we have some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
So our social media is Why Hate Math. That's on Instagram, and we have our website at whyhatemath.com.
Now, do you serve only New York area individuals?
We also do virtual learning as well, but we love the in-person learning. But virtual, if that's the only means of connecting, then we're here.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, Melinda and Candace. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.